Every year I make a list on my phone, naturally, of all of the movies coming out in the year. And I put a little check mark next to them when I watch them. I count how many times I've gone to the theater. Now I'm doing a cry count. So now the count is up to 7. I think that's a little bit too many. I feel like the first thing I want to mention is that the sequel for this was actually filmed back to back with 28 Years Later, and it'll be released 28 weeks after the release of 28 Years Later, so it'll be released on January 16th of 2026. I feel like I definitely could have cleaned that up a little bit and said it differently, but there you go. There's also a talk of a third one, possibly, to make it a 28 Years trilogy. Now, I believe that was said in like an interview in 2024, so I don't know how true that is. Maybe they'll just wait and see how the sequel does to 28 Years Later. Personally, I feel like it doesn't need a sequel, especially if we are seeing more of what we saw in the end. I don't think I'd be a huge fan of that. But will I watch it? Yeah. I'm gonna keep watching all these movies. Let's make it a whole franchise, why don't we? So this movie is directed by Danny Boyle, who did, of course, direct the original 28 Days Later, and he also directed Sunshine, and those are kind of like his horror movies that he's done. Love Sunshine, it's one of my favorite movies of all time, so clearly I'm a fan of Danny Boyle. It is also written by Alex Garland, and that man always has something to say with his movies. Yes, he does. So he has done Men. He's written Men, Civil War, Warfare, which is his most recent movie besides 20 Years Later, Annihilation, Dread, Ex Machina. He always has some kind of commentary on society or politics or humanity or something to say. And I feel like 28 Years Later is definitely no different. And I feel like that is one of the reasons why people don't like this movie. A lot of people hate this movie, and we will get into all of that in a minute. Now, this was shot mostly on an iPhone 15 Pro Max with certain techniques, and I think that was so impressive. Of course, it's like beefed up, okay? It's not just like, all right, let's film a movie. It has lenses and stabilizers and things happening. I'm sure they used some CG in post as well, but there are some really cool techniques that they did with strapping multiple phones. I forget how many phones that they used for a single shot. It's like 25 in order to get like a single shot. And when you see it in action in the movie, I think it's really, really cool. So I like that they did something different with the film techniques alone. So this movie follows a group who has survived the rage virus, and they live on a small island. And one of the group leaves the island on a mission into the mainland and discovers secrets, wonders, and horrors that have mutated not only the infected, but other survivors. I need to point out that the small island is off the mainland, Scotland. Scotland is my dream vacation. Is one of the most beautiful countries in the entire world that I will visit one day, probably in my 40s. I will finally get a passport and go visit Scotland. So anything set there, yeah. It's a stunning movie for that setting alone. You can't film in Scotland and have it not be a beautiful movie. So I feel like they don't even have to try very hard with their shots or their editing and post or anything like that with lighting. I feel like it just is beautiful. It just is. So that's a very smart location to film this, especially for a zombie apocalyptic movie. I think it's a really cool juxtaposition between the ugly infected things we have going on, the gore, with beautiful Scotland. Now, speaking of editing, I feel like the editing is always the first thing that stands out to me about these movies. There's something so unique about the way that they do fast cuts, and there's like really sharp scenes. I don't know how to explain it, but they'll like jump cut with no noise to a running infected, and then they'll jump back to a scene of two people talking or something. And I think that's really unique, and they don't really like change the audio there. But then their scores and their soundtracks are always so unique as well. I'm not always a fan of the music they choose to go with, but it definitely fits the vibe of the franchise. I guess now it's a franchise. It fits the vibe of the movies, and I think 28 Years Later fits perfectly in there as a trilogy. It's edited very similarly, and it felt very reminiscent of 28 Days Later specifically. The cast in this was incredible. We have Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jodie Comer, but the star of the show for me, Ralph Fiennes. I might be a little bit biased because I love Ralph Fiennes. And obviously, yes, I'm very excited that he was cast as President Snow in Sunrise on the Reaping, okay? But Ralph Fiennes' character was by far my favorite in the whole movie, and he wasn't even in it for most of it. He was just in it for like a little bit. So let's talk about why or, you know, the fact that people hate this movie and why people hate it maybe. And every time they always bring up the tonal shift. So about halfway through the movie, I want to say there is a tonal shift, and it is more extreme than any of the other movies, the other two movies that is. And it kind of turns into more drama, even a little adventure, if you ask me, which I love an adventure story. But I feel like each of the movies did something similarly, maybe not as much to the extreme as 28 Years Later did with its tonal shift, but the other movies definitely had heart and soul in them, and I think that's something that makes these stand out from other zombie apocalypse movies and things, because you're going to get a more zoomed in focus on the characters. These are very character-driven stories and story-driven, you know? And that was definitely no different in 28 Years Later, and I'm not sure that's what they had an issue with, because to me, it's very reminiscent of 28 Days Later also. In 28 Days Later, we have the weird, you know, implications when they get to the military base, and there's some disturbing elements there and like the heart there. And then 28 weeks later, we have the brother and sister who are trying to survive as well, and, you know, dealing with their parents and things like that. So they've always had that heart and soul at the core of the movie, and always has some kind of commentary on the world or humanity itself. So maybe this one pushed it a little bit more to the extreme, so it's not going to be as effective for everybody, but it was very effective for me. What I didn't like and what I hated, yes, there are things I don't like about this movie, was the tonal shift at the end. What was that scene? Wasn't really a fan of that, I'm not gonna lie. That just felt very disjointed from the rest of the movie, and I'm a little bit nervous that the sequel's just gonna start from there, and we're gonna see more of that. And I don't love that. I don't love how weird that felt. And honestly, I saw a screenshot of that on Twitter, and I thought it was a joke. Like, people were just like joking around, and that was a screenshot from something else, but that was actually from the movie, and I was like, that was real. Okay. So did not like the ending of that movie. I feel like zombie movies, typically, if you look at the history and everything, kind of reflect what is happening in the world, what's going on in the world, and you can apply any zombie movie to the times, and it kind of dates them, but in a really interesting way, because it takes on commentary of like society or politics or humanity or things like that. And I think that's really important with zombie movies since the very first one. And so this one obviously highlights the layers of humanity and how we're evolving, you know, kind of that commentary using the different types of infected and how we would evolve in this kind of horrific setting. And maybe people don't like that. I know some people don't like politics mixed in with their movies, but you can't separate that all the time, okay? That movies are politics. Art is political. Okay. I should say that louder. Art is political. Movies are political. Okay. Speaking of different types of infected, not only have the people evolved in this world, the infected have also mutated. And we get a couple different types of infected and how they manage to make them even more horrifying. I mean, zombies never really scare me too much. I mean, they're fast in this series, so I feel like that's scary alone. But zombies never really did it for me. Yeah, this time they did. Just to look at them, horrifying, just the concept. I'll go more into detail in spoilers, but yeah, very effective for me. I love that they changed that up, because I think when you're gonna do a third in a zombie trilogy, you really need to like change things or like evolve things, evolve the story a little bit. And they've just like pushed everything to the 100th degree. They push the emotions, they push the horror elements, like the infected and how scary they are. They've really like pushed everything to a 10, in my opinion. I know there are people who disagree with that. So let's just get into the spoilers, shall we? We need to talk about it. Let's start with the tonal shift first. So Spike ends up leaving with his mom to go back to the mainland and track down the last known doctor that could possibly still be alive on the mainland. Now, this is the part of the film where things really focus on humanity and like empathy. And I feel like we get a couple different types of examples of like how someone might evolve when faced with this kind of horror. So we have the character of Eric, who is a Swedish soldier, I want to say, and he's kind of cutthroat. He's like, has no empathy. He's like, kill everything, kill everyone. Like, I don't trust anybody. He's very cold. Juxtaposed with that is Ralph Fiennes' character as the doctor. Now, we also get to see an infected woman give birth. So there were a lot of my triggers in this, actually. The opening scene, nobody's talking about that. Can we mention that a bunch of kids die or, you know, get bitten and get turned into infected? Can we talk about that? Why? I thought y'all were on my side. Not one of you warned me about that. I heard about the birth scene. What about the kids? There's a bunch of kids in a room watching TV, terrified. Okay, they're like 9 and lower. And then I'm like, surely they're not going to let an infected loose in here, right? And sure enough, they do. And they all die, except for one, of course, good old Jimmy. Anyway, so we got children dying. We have a birthing scene. I feel like none of it really triggered me too much. I mean, they weren't graphic. I mean, the birthing, you get to see it. But it's not just like, it's not like in Men, you know, it's not zoomed in. It's just there. It just is a birth. But I actually really loved the birth scene because it showed the heart, and like, it was very emotional for me because obviously that woman, the infected, is alone, but she's the enemy, right? But she's alone. She went into this bus to give birth by herself, and Isla walks in and sees what's happening and reaches out to her and holds her hands while she pushes this baby out. And then of course Eric had to come along, you know. I mean, she had to die, right? The pregnant lady, she had to die, but then the baby was not infected. Now that's where it lost a little bit. I couldn't hold my suspension of disbelief because we're giving a newborn river water. I understand they don't need a lot of nourishment for the first couple days of their life. Their stomachs are still trying to figure out digestion and being in the world, okay? I get it. They don't need milk. They should get milk right away, but they don't need it necessarily to survive. But river water, we're just giving her water like that. Okay, now you're not supposed to give babies water. Yeah, babies can't have water. They can't really digest it. But then the doctor's like, give it, you know, it can survive for a couple days on water, but it needs milk. Thank you for clarifying that it needs milk. Can we get it some milk? It needs some milk. I cannot hold my suspension of disbelief for any movie that does not realistically handle a baby. And I know that's bad because you can't. You can't just focus on it because that baby would become their entire world trying to keep it alive. Okay, it's gonna be crying all the time. It needs to eat every 2 hours. Like, it's unrealistic. Okay, I just had to go on a little rant there for a minute. And movies never portray it accurately, and I know they can't because it's not going to move the story along, because then that's going to be the whole focus, is trying to take care of this baby. Anyway, let's move on. Then we discover the mom has cancer. The doctor diagnoses her with cancer and offers to kill her, basically with his little blow dart, and that's what they do. He burns her, gives the skull to the son to place on the bone temple, and he places her at the very top at the best spot. And then Ralph Fiennes, he does his whole little speech about memento mori, memento amor. That's where I was losing it, okay? I just couldn't stop crying. I was trying so hard not to, and I could not stop. And all of that, I genuinely don't understand how people would be turned off by all of that. I get why it wouldn't necessarily affect you as much, but why not explore humanity in a zombie movie? I feel like that's the perfect opportunity to explore these themes of empathy, and they did it perfectly in my opinion, and I loved it. I loved all of those scenes. And yeah, the horror is lacking, but it doesn't need to be horrific every 2 seconds. I think there is enough horror throughout the film to allow for us to have that emotional exploration of humanity in a post-apocalyptic infected world. Now, the final scene just goes pure comedy. on us, okay? What was that? I just really did not like it. It's pretty goofy. We have Spike, who ends up going back out to, you know, he drops the baby off at the shelter at his little island, and then he leaves. He decides he's gonna be like the doctor and just survive out there as a 12-year-old, okay? Very brave guy. And then we see a bunch of people, I want to say Swedish people in tracksuits show up when he's a little bit overwhelmed by too many infected, and they're like, mind if we do this? Can we kill him for you? And then sure enough, they do. But it's like almost like an action movie at that, or like a comic book. It felt very comic booky to me with the music and everything. It just felt so disjointed from the tone of like the rest of the movie that we just came from, especially the scenes right before that. So again, not sure if that's where the beginning of the sequel is going to start, with these people, and we're gonna just like hang out with them for a little while. I doubt they'll be in the movie like the whole time, but it was just very strange. It kind of caught me off guard. The alphas and the bloated. Let's talk about the new infected, okay? I would love to hear, are you team alpha or team bloated? Which one is scarier to you? Obviously, the alphas are gonna be harder to beat, okay? So that would be the one you don't wanna take on. But horror-wise, just looking at them, I think the bloated are scary, okay? I say bloated, but they're probably just eating so much off the forest floor that they're just obese, I think. I loved both equally. I loved the bloated more, actually. I hope we get to see more of them, and I think that they were made a little bit of a joke, and I think we need to take them a little bit more seriously, okay? Just horror-wise, it was scary. Honestly, it felt very Junji Ito, almost, to me, with the different infected types, and then also the ending. I don't know, something about it. The big bloated zombies eating the worms. Tell me that's not from a Junji Ito book, okay? But I love that they are different and they're terrifying in their own ways. Obviously the alphas, they're alpha. You can't beat them. They take 12 shots to go down. So yeah, you're not defeating an alpha, and that's horrifying to me. I'm not sure if they intended for there to be a lot of commentary around masculinity. I didn't pick up on a lot of that, so I'm not really gonna comment on that, but let me know if that's something that you noticed as a theme. I feel like the dad, if that was a theme, the dad kind of played into that a little bit, because he is obviously not a great person. He exaggerates a lot. He's lying to the rest of the crew, and that's pretty harmless, I would say. Like, you know, the son is like, you're lying. So I feel like you should tone it down if your kid is like, hey, stop lying. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like not a huge deal. But then he obviously cheats on his wife. So, and I don't think he probably cared that she died. I'm gonna say that. Anyway, those are all my thoughts on 28 Years Later. I really loved it. I think I would give it 4 out of 5. Yeah, I don't really have much criticism for the rest of the film. It's really just the ending that stood out to me. And yeah, everything else I thought was done pretty well, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Make sure to leave a comment down below what you thought about this movie. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon.